All right, we're back, and it looks like we're live. COMP123 in the summer 2020 semester. YouTube's changed today for whatever reason, which is totally cool. And we're week 11, part 1. We're going to talk about assignment 5 details as well as a lot of other stuff. Sorry, I got a bit derailed this morning because of some of the changes. I just wanted to repost the video link because it's going to be a different link up on eCentennial. So we're going to be talking about how to access data with SQL and a local database. We're going to be talking about that, which is very exciting. Because one of the things when we make user interfaces is they have to be useful, and just making a user interface to do input and saving to your local machine is okay, but it'd be nice if we can connect to a database. So we're going to talk about how to do that today and probably into next week, because this next assignment is a doozy. Okay, it's pretty good. And I mean a doozy as in it's not going to be super hard, because a lot of the stuff you've got is some of the stuff you already have. So I'm just going to give you more to let you to help you do this assignment. So let's go into the assignment details. Here's assignment 5. It should be up on eCentennial now and live. And I'm just curious, for the people that are watching on YouTube, can I get somebody, because this is a new thing, can I get somebody to take a look at the YouTube link and see if I am actually live or if it's just saying that I'm live? I'm not sure. I can't see it on the other side, so I can't tell if I'm live or not. Can I get somebody to do that and then send me a bit of a chat so I know if I can continue? And I'll do that as I'm going, because right now I only see me as a participant. Okay, it's working. Thank you. That's all I needed. Okay, so this is due week 13. This is the last day of classes at midnight is when this is due. This is a multi-form application. So what you're going to be building, and I think somebody came on. Arshdeep, are you have to, can you mute yourself, please? Actually, I'll do you. I'll mute you for you. This is a multi-view application, like I said, and I just wanted to show you. And it's also going to have menus. So there's going to be a couple of menus that look like this. And what you're going to be doing is simulating what it's like to order from a computer shop that's old. An old computer shop that's selling Windows 7 computers and 486s. Okay, because this is an older assignment that I've resurrected for you guys. So there's going to be menus on several different kind of pages. We'll talk about how to do menus starting today. And saving and loading is going to be part of the assignment. So the things that we talked about last week is what we're going to be continuing this week. Okay, so we're going to be still doing, kind of multi-form applications. We talked about that last week. We're going to continue with this week. And I'm just going to flash to some examples. I put some examples in the assignment. Again, this is in the PDF document online. So you're going to create a splash screen. So that's one of the things we talked about also last week, how to make a splash screen that kind of appears for a bit and then goes to something like a start form, which we also talked about last week. This is kind of like a dashboard, and if you notice, you can start a new order, open a saved order, or exit. Almost exactly what we kind of talked about how to do last week in last week's video. So that's kind of the stuff that we're doing there. And then we have our different forms. This form here would be the select form. So this is if you want to start a new order, you're going to have access to a bunch of orders on the database. I'm going to give you the database if I can. One thing I forgot to do when I put up the assignment is give you the database, because I don't want you to fill things in. Now, obviously, this is some old data. As you can see, there's i5s, second generation i5s here. There's not new stuff, as an example, but there's some older i7s and so on. This is like an older list of computers. You can definitely update it if you wish, but it's not the exercise here. So what you're going to do is, if you notice what this form is going to be, is it's a data grid. That's what it is. We're going to talk about data grids today and how to connect it to a database. That's one thing. And the data grid, what it does is it's actually automatic. As long as you have data in the database, the data grid will connect to it, and you can decide what fields from the database you're going to display. That's what this does, and we're going to talk about that today. So that'll be your select form. So again, if you notice, splash screen, you can open up a new order. Start a new order is going to take you to the select form. You're going to select a computer product from the list. And when you select it, it's going to highlight the row. So there's some special effects we're going to do. And it's also going to display the row data here. Only select pieces of data are going to be displayed here. Once you select the row, the next button will be available, and you can go to the product info form, which is going to basically take the information from this row and display it here. Obviously, how are you going to do that? You're going to do that by carrying forward the information that you have here into a class. I highly recommend. All right, that's the way you should do it. And I don't think I mentioned that inside the assignment, because there's other ways to do it too. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of leeway. So I don't think I make you do a class, if I'm not wrong. If I go up here into the form, so here's your select form. And by the way, it looks long, but all this is just basically telling you how to do it, okay? As opposed to like telling you, hey, this is what I want, go. I mean, I'm just giving you details here. That's all it is. It looks long, but it's actually there to help you. And I'm actually telling you how I'm going to mark you through this thing. And by the way, we talked about marks earlier in this discussion, and the way I mark you can actually mark yourself with the stuff that you've handed in. If you actually take my document, which is what I'm going to do, and go through it and say to yourself, do I have a cancel button? Yes. Okay. If it's on the form, as an example, then you'll get 1 mark for UI. If it works, then you'll get 1 mark for functionality. And that's how I do it. I don't sit there and go, well, I can't give these guys 100%, and I don't do that. If your thing is worth 100%, you'll get 100%. I mean, if you follow the instructions, I'm good. So select form, you select stuff, and it talks about something called an entity framework to connect to the database. We're going to be talking about that a little bit today, if we can, and then next week again. I'm not going to leave the database part because the database is the trickiest piece on how to do, so we'll talk about how to do that. And for the database, you're going to be connecting to a database that's local to you. Localdb is what it's going to be. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Everybody who has Visual Studio 2019 has a local SQL database that they can connect to. Okay, so that's one thing to note. So you're going to have that information. Okay, so then you're going to transport the data, right, as an example, and you're going to take it into product info form. Again, it doesn't talk about how to do it. It just says basically you're going to have a series of labels and buttons and group boxes, to display, the data from the previous file, right? If you click the select another product button, so if I go back to the form, this is the application we're going to make together, okay? So again, you select something, you go to the product info form, here it is. If you click next, as an example, there's also a little menu here, if you notice. If you click next, it'll take you to the order form. And then we're going to simulate what it's like to order this object, this thing that we're doing, by clicking the finish button. As soon as you've selected this, it's going to say thank you very much for your order, blah, 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 little form that's going to come up. Okay, that's how it's going to work. Okay, but how do you transport the data from one form to the other? Again, I highly recommend using a class structure, although I'm pretty sure I don't tell you this inside of I'm not forcing you to do it, all right? If you wanted to do it by passing data from one form to the other, I would allow it, although I don't recommend it. And the reason for that is because, again, there's more than one way of doing this thing, and I want to give you guys some freedom when it comes to doing stuff, right? As opposed to me telling you exactly what I want every single time. But I highly recommend it. It's just easier. So that is the general thing. The other thing you can do is, if you notice in the menu that you're going to make for product info form, you have the ability for you to open a product that you've already saved. You can save a product that you selected, so you can come back and continue the order, right? You don't have to order it all at once like normal. So for example, if you go into the form, you can see that there's a start a new order button and open a saved order button. Well, obviously you can't open a saved order unless you've actually saved it. And the way you would save it is if you go to product info form and there's a little menu here, you click save and it would save your information. You can also click open and you can open your information, the information from a file. So we've talked about file loading and saving last week, and you'd use the open file dialog and save file dialog in order for you to do this, right? So we've talked about how to do that. I've made a video about this, so it should be pretty clear on how to do it. But again, I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of how this works. Okay, then the order form, there's also going to be a little menu here, and one of the menu items that you're going to get is the a print button. There's not going to be printing. I'm not going to get you guys to print anything because, let's be honest, printing is kind of dead. No one really prints much anymore. And if we do, we print it to PDF, or that kind of thing. It's rare nowadays that we print a Word document. It's rather that we save the Word document and send it through email or some other system. But back in the day, we used to print stuff. So like I said, I've resurrected this assignment for you. But basically what's going to happen is you're going to display a message box for the print option that's basically saying, hey, you know what? Your selection is printing. That's all it's going to say. It's going to simulate printing. Why? Because actually doing printing is actually quite challenging to do, right? With Windows forms, you have to control everything that will appear on the printer, and I think it goes out of bounds for what we're doing in this course. Although, to be fair, we're kind of out of bounds with the stuff that I'm getting you to do, but I think it's going to be awesome for you. It says calculate BMI. I'm not sure why it says calculate BMI, but it's I guess that's the solution structure. I'm telling you how you would do it. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what you're making. Okay, this is wrong. So this is a copy paste error. Obviously, you're going to be describing your code in your video, and hopefully you've had success making your videos. So when it shows you the video, it's 10%, or sorry, yeah, it's 10 out of 10 marks out of 100 for this thing. And what I need you to do is, again, make sure that I can hear you on your videos sometimes. And I have looked at some of the assignments. I haven't marked any of them, but I have looked at the assignments, and I can tell you that some of you have come in very low from a volume perspective on the videos. So please make sure that you can hear yourself when you record your video. I want to be able to hear what you're saying so I can give you, credit for it. Okay. Again, if you don't hand in a video, I can't accept your assignment, only because from an academic integrity perspective, I want to make sure it's you. That's all it is. Okay. It's not because of anything else. I want to know whether it's you. I want to hear you make the video. It's important that you hand this in, or I can't mark you. Okay. So please do that. This is worth 100 marks, but it's only worth 10%. All right. So actually, it's going to be eventually worth around 8%, because there's really only 40% for all of your assignments, and there's already 4 assignments out there. This is the 5th, so this would be around 8%. Again, when I was doing this course before, I had it so that there was 5 assignments like this one, and I didn't have any labs or bonus. Professor Narendra wanted labs to be worth something, so the labs you've already done are worth 2.5% each, which is good for you. It's awesome. Which means that the labs that you're going to do, if you've already done them, are worth 10% of your, and that's including my little lab for Github. They're worth 2.5% each, and if you've done them, that's an easy 10% in my opinion. Okay, so that is what the assignment is. Please read carefully when you go through the details, but more or less use these samples as your guide. Okay, that's what you're going to do. Use the samples as your guide to make sure that you get the assignment done. I would again start as soon as possible. This assignment takes a little longer, only because, not because of its complexity, but rather because there are multiple forms, and you want to make sure that you name all the forms properly, like splash screen, start form, and so on. You want to make sure all these things are named right. And it talks about that from a structure perspective. Okay? So any questions around this, the assignment number 5? Right. Again, this is what you're making. You're connecting to data. I know there's usually not any questions until you start doing it, but this is what we're doing. Okay. So it's assignment number 5. again, what we're doing with this one, it's going to be due the last week of class at midnight, right? Which will give you a chance to, a couple weeks to get going on this thing. This, just a reminder, we're sitting today at Wednesday, August 5th, and this week, August 7th, you have another assignment. I know I was asked for an extension today, but this week is August 7th is when your assignment is officially due. That's assignment number 4, right? And that's BMI calculator. So hopefully most of you are well on your way to finishing that by now. You could still get it done even if you haven't started yet. It's not a big assignment, but it requires, again, a little bit of a step through. So make sure you go through assignment number 4 before you hand it in, and you go through it. So for example, I'm just going to close this one down, and I'm going to open up assignment number 4 just briefly, just to talk about it before we go, because this is what's due this week, and I want to make sure that that you don't forget this, because it's important, right? So not that anything else is not important, it's just I want to make sure that you've got all the details. I want to make sure I pull it up too for assignment 4. Okay, so let's get to that, wherever it may be. There it is. So assignment 4, remember, it's due this Friday, August 7th at midnight as a reminder, and it's a BMI calculator. I've given you some requirements on how to get this done. Go through it, guys. When you do your assignment, make sure you go through section by section and make sure you check mark the things that I've asked you to do. I've given you the mark breakdown right here. Again, you know, if you want to get your marks, and this one is fairly well balanced, where assignment 4 is looking at 40 marks for UI. Just to make your user interface, you're going to get 40 marks. And if you had no functionality, you'd still get 40 marks out of 100, right? Combine that with version control and your video demo, I mean, you could pass, right? It's not a terrible good mark. You would have you would have issues, with actually doing well, but you'd pass if you just did your user interface, your video demo, version control, internal documentation, and you followed the program structure requirements. I mean, really, you could get as high as a 66% is what it looks like on your assignment just by doing those things, right? And no functionality, 0, nothing works. I mean, like, there's just stuff inside the assignment. So I mean, that's pretty good, right? For to make the assignment happen. But I would recommend is go through and check mark. So I've got BMI calculator user interface. We'll use a table layout panel. That's required. Check mark. A radio button control. Check mark. A label control. Check mark. Keep going through the whole thing and check it all off. Even highlight it. What you may want to do is just do one of these. When it's done, go to the highlighter and highlight it and say that's done, right? So or highlight it in green if you don't like yellow. That's done, kind of thing. So that way you can say, okay, I've done this part, as an example, right? And if there's parts you can't do, and sometimes what I do when I go through assignments, let's say, for example, I don't know, you go down and you say, I really don't know how to do this part. It displays the user's calculated BMI. This is the part that's really caused me a lot of consternation. Then I mark that with the red. I say, okay, I can't do this part. I need to ask questions. I need to, get help on this, or whatever it's going to be. This is what's causing me a problem. And then when you go through it, you can actually go through and mark some of the stuff that you know how to do and some of the stuff you don't know how to do, and you can approximate in your head how much I would give you, and that's pretty accurate. I'll tell you right now, if you actually were to go through this, give or take, plus or minus, you're going to be fairly close to what I would give you in your mark, right? You should know how to do that, okay? Also, for optional items, when I say here's some optional items, I've shown you how to do a splash screen. Okay, I've already done this with you guys. That was last week. If you wanted to add it in, even if you've submitted already and you want to resubmit, remember, you get to resubmit as many times as you want. I'll take the latest submission, or the last one is what I mean, as your final submission, right? So if you wanted to add a splash screen, that's totally cool. You can add a splash screen and get 4 bonus marks, but you need to let me know. Please let me know, especially in your demo video, that, hey, by the way, here are my bonus, here are the optional features I've added to my app, right? So that way I can give you credit for this kind of stuff, okay? So that's assignment 4. Similarly, for assignment 5, you're going to do the same thing. I want you guys to go through, read through everything carefully, and then take a look at those features. Now, assignment 5 is weighted a lot differently than assignment 4. Just to note, right? Because assignment 4 kind of suggested that there's certain things you know how to do, and there's certain things you don't know how to do because it's your first time you're doing kind of a user interface. But assignment 5, the breakdown for marks are significantly different, right? Notice that in assignment 4 you could pass by doing just a user interface, but in assignment 5 that's not the case. In assignment 5 your user interface is only worth 28 marks out of 100, right? If you were to add that in with your video presentation, version control, and internal documentation, it would not be enough for a pass. 50%, actually, well, almost. I have to say that's not 100% true, because if you add program structure in there as well, I mean, functionality is worth 50% of your assignment, and the rest is, I mean, if you got everything perfect, you would just pass. How about that? But mostly, to do well, you'd have to do some kind of functionality, and even if it's a little bit, it'd be enough to get you to pass. I'm just trying to think about it, strategize for you a little bit when we start thinking about assignments, how to do my assignment, kind of thing. But I mean, think about this 50%. Why? Because now this is the last assignment. It's a culmination of everything that you've done through the entire course, and you should be more comfortable with doing programming at this point. Programming user interfaces, and even programming, from the first half of the course when you were with Professor Narendra. Okay, so that's where the breakdown is. So moving on. So we've talked about the assignment breakdown and how that's going to work. And now what I want to do, and I'm going to be referencing this PowerPoint. So PowerPoint from last week, week 10, part 2, which I talk about using linked access data in C# programs. I'm also going to be talking about this week, like I said, how to do menus. We haven't done that yet. And as well as how to use, if I can get to it today, entity framework and what that is. So we're going to start off a brand new application today because I want to start fresh. So we're going to make a new project. Let's do this together. I'm going to start a new Windows Forms application, this one. Okay, I'm going to click Next. And I'm going to name it like we normally name it. So COMP123 in the summer 2020 semester, and it's lesson 11. I'm not going to make it part 1 or part 2, just lesson 11. Be careful of where you put it. Right now it looks like it's going to go in my repos folder. If you don't want it there, put it in the right folder, please. I'm going to put this one on my desktop so that I can also keep track of what I've been doing. And later on in the summer, I promise I'll clean up my desktop. It's getting messy. So here's where I'm going to put it. This is my desktop. And I'm going to click Create, which is going to create my application. Just like before, the first thing we should do is change this form 1 and name it something else, right, as an example. So I'm going to really use some way of connecting to a database. So this is going to be where we're going to actually, almost like a database view form is what this is going to be. I want to do this first. So I'm going to kind of change the name. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go to rename, and I'm going to call this DB view form. Okay, database view form. And it says, do you want to rename everything? And the answer is yes. Please always say yes there. DB view form. So our DB view form is our database view, but we don't have a database that we're accessing yet. Okay. Just like before, when I click on the form, what I want to do is I want to scroll down and I want to change the title, the text. So it says DB view. And my start position, again, I'm not happy with Windows default location. I'm going to change this to center screen. Okay, that's the first thing. I'm also, before I change the size, I'm going to change my font size to what I want, which is, it's going to be 20. And then I'm going to go down and change the size of my form to 800 by 600. Okay, 800 by 600, which is a pretty good proportional size form. I'm also going to go and, just like we've done before, and change the form border style from sizable to fixed single. So that's kind of one thing that we're going to do. So that way now the form is the way it is. Let's test this form out by clicking Start. So we can see that right now the form appears as we like. One thing we forgot was this maximize box, and I think it's great to have a maximize box if you had additional information that the form was going to show you. But a lot of times maximize boxes, now if we're making a form like this, doesn't make any sense. So let's turn that off. So we're going to go to maximize box and we're going to say false. Okay, so we've configured our form like we have done in the past. And if I start this thing, you can see again, I can't maximize. I can close or I can minimize. And that's where we are with this thing. This is a great place to start putting it up on GitHub. So we're going to add this solution to source control. I'm going to right click on my solution. I'm going to add to source control, add solution to source control here. And what this is going to do, it's going to do in the background a git add dot, right? A git add, which is going to add everything to the to the Git repository. What I want to do here is I want to go to Team Explorer now, and I'm going to go to changes, and you can see that there's no changes because it's captured our initial state of our form. And then I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to click Sync. And if you have the proper extension installed, which I do, Publish to GitHub, I'm going to click Publish to GitHub here. And then it's going to tell me where. Well, I want to put it Centennial College. It's going to be called COMP123 M2020 Lesson 11. Okay, this is where it's going to be. And then I'm going to click Publish. And if I've configured my machine properly, which I have, then you should see everything that you're used to seeing. Hopefully you guys are with me on this. If you're with me, please indicate it with the check mark in the participants panel. If you're not, X at this point. You guys should be with me at this point because we've done this a ton of times, and this is all practice. You should be practicing along with me. If you're just watching, I want to see your hand come up if you're just watching. So show me your hand, like almost like a raise hand thing if you're watching. It's totally cool to watch. It's better to watch than not to do anything, right? So I see some people are watching and some people are participating. Again, although I have to urge you guys to try and participate as much as possible. Thank you for that. I'm just going to clear all that. Try and participate as much as possible when you're here in class, so that way you have a chance to make mistakes and ask questions. Okay. Cool. So we also have our toolbox. Here's our toolbox. But before we get going, there's a couple things I want to do. I want to connect to a database. We've talked about this. And there are additional controls that we're going to get to for this. Additional little windows. And the one that I want you to open now, which you all should have if you go to View, I want you to go to SQL Server Object Explorer. Okay, click on the SQL Server Object Explorer, please. When you do, you're going to see this, something like this come up. Okay? Something like this is going to come up. And you're going to see a couple of databases. Sometimes you'll see more than one. Okay, sometimes you'll only see one. But if you notice, I have two. One of them is MS SQL Localdb, and the other one is Projects V13 something else. Okay, yours might look something like this. But notice there's a thing on the side here that says Localdb. Okay, Localdb means that it's being hosted on your machine. Everyone by default has a little server, a SQL server, that's running on your machine for testing purposes. So it allows you to make Windows Forms application with a data backend. Okay. Does anyone not have this when they launch their application? Because if you don't have this, it'll prevent you from doing a lot of stuff we're doing today. Okay. So again, what you need to check is if you go to View and if you go to SQL Server Object Explorer here, it'll bring up a little window that looks like this. Okay. And SQL Server Object Explorer is basically going to show you a couple of databases. Okay, so if you don't have this, please indicate it with an X on your participant panel, so we can try and work that out. Looks like most of you have it. Okay, so this is the next part. So now that you have this, we know we have a database to connect to. Now the key is this sequence. Now notice my desktop is called Godlike Desktop. By the way, You know, it's only because I'm using the MSI godlike motherboard, not because I think the desktop is godlike. All right, it's just the way that's what it's called. And if you want to ever check on this, and I don't you know, get any endorsements from MSI or anything like that, but if you go to MSI Z490 godlike, right, you can see the motherboard that I chose for my build. I talked about this new build that I'm making. This is the motherboard that I'm choosing. It's an eATX motherboard, which has allowed me to house my i9-10900K with 64 gigs of RAM and so on. Okay, so this is the motherboard. That's why it's called godlike, not because of anything else. So hopefully none of you get offended. All right, that's why I brought that up, not for any other reason. All right, so that is why it's called this. Yours will be called whatever your desktop is going to be called, right? Which might be a series of numbers. It could also just say your name's desktop or your name's PC, whatever your name is, okay, in this case. So that's the first step. So if you have this, we're good to go. Next, we're going to go to our toolbox, okay? And what we want, if you notice, is down in here where it says data, right? There is something called a data grid view. This is the data grid view that I want you to drag and drop. Now, a data grid view comes with a bunch of little things all at once. So if I take this data grid view and I drag and drop it onto my form, right? There's a couple things it says. If I don't choose a data source, first of all, we can decide where this data grid view is going to be. Think about this as a table that's going to show your data. That's what it's going to be. All right, this is where the data grid view is going to appear. I recommend you make it something big like this. All right, this level. There's no data that we're connecting to right now, so there's nothing in the gutter. But later on, we're going to have some stuff in the gutter. In order for us to connect to the database, we need a database in the first place. Right now, we don't have a database. We just have a server. Okay, so again, if I go to SQL Server Object Explorer, this window, and if I just expand it, you can see that there's a database. If I expand that, we don't have a database. We just have something called system databases. We need to create a new database inside of our folder in order for us to do this. So I'm going to right click here and I want to add a new database. Do this with me, guys, or at least if you're watching, you're going to have to do this on your own at another point. When I add a new database, you need to name the database whatever you want, and it's going to go into, remember, I'm looking at MS SQL Localdb. That's where I'm connecting, not this one, not Projects v13. This one, MS SQL Localdb. Okay. My database name is what I want to do, so I'm just going to call this database less than 11 DB. Okay, so we know that it's from our lesson, and then I'm going to press OK. So there, now we have a new lesson under databases. Okay, we have system databases and we have our database. Now you guys have been doing database stuff. You should know a little bit about databases. Databases have tables, and right now we have no tables in our database. We're going to make a new table that's going to house a customer or a contact, because we've been doing contacts, that have a first name, last name, a telephone number, and an email address. Okay, that's the kind of stuff we're going to have. So I'm going to right click on my table and I'm going to make a new table, add new table, okay, for my database. Notice there is a script that's down here that we're going to access later on. Okay, we have an ID. Okay, that's the first thing we're going to have. And we have no other fields. This up here is our little designer. Okay, so we can see the DB form view. This is our DB form. This is the DBO table here. Okay. So I want to add additional fields, right? So how would I do this? Because I want to add more fields. Right now I have these things, right, in my table, right? And this is my table designer, right? So this is my SQL script. Notice it says DBO table.sql. We need to call this something else. So it can't just be called table, right? I want to call this something else. So again, instead of table, we're going to call this table contacts. So go down here and put in contacts and press save. Oops, sorry, just leave it there. This is going to make it so this is the contacts table eventually, right? We have an ID, this ID field right here. This is the first field, right? The name, the data type, and so on, right? This is how we enter fields. Our ID is definitely we want it auto incrementing, okay? And which means we have to make our identity is identity. We're going to change this to true here. All right, this makes it primary key identity, which means the ID is going to be auto incrementing. That's what it does, okay? Do we want to allow nulls? Absolutely not. We need our key to be always filled in. And there's a little key symbol here that's on the left. Next, what I want to do is I want to enter a new field. I'm just going to double click on the field in the bottom of the ID in order for me to make a new one, all right? And the ID that we're going to make, we're going to call it is first name. We're going to spell it like we want, first name. From a character perspective, it's asking us to do an nchar. We have other options for data, how we're going to select it. I recommend an nvchar 50, okay, an nvchar 50. If you're really careful, or if you're really worried, you can also always make it a varchar or varchar 50. Let's make it a varchar 50. Okay. Are we going to allow nulls for our first name? No, we cannot null. So notice that it actually scripts it out for us down here. Let's do another one, but by scripting it down here instead of putting it in there, and see what happens. So we're going to go down to here. We're going to press comma. We're going to down here, open square brackets, and call this last name. We can do it this way as well. We're going to say varchar or varchar, however you want to pronounce it, 50, not null. Okay. And if you go back up here, it creates it for you. So there's two ways to do it. You can do it through this table view. You can do it down here through a T-SQL view. This is the actual T-SQL that allows you to do these changes. Okay. So first name, last name. We want to also add in their email address. Right. Again, we want to make it varchar 50, right, to give us enough space. Allow nulls? No. There's other options, by the way. Okay. We could put in other things in here. Be careful. Whatever you put in here is going to be something that is going to be validated. And if you put in a wrong option, then you'll have a weird validation error. Okay. Email address. We're also going to put in a contact number. Again, contact number. All right. So first name, last name, email address, contact number. I think that's enough. And again, we're going to say varchar 50 for our contact number. But that's probably wrong. Varchar 50 is pretty big as a field, data field, for our contact number. So what we want to put in is something that's more reasonable. It's not going to be numeric because we don't want a numeric field. So we can put something smaller amount. Instead of varchar 50, we want to say that we may enter up to X number of data fields. So we have 10 digits. Example 416-555-5555. 10 digits. Let's say the person wants to put in brackets too. So for his area code, so that's 2 more. That's 12. Then maybe the area code numbers. Let's say 3 digits for the area code numbers. So that's 15, right? And then maybe a dash or a space, 16. So we can make it safely 20 and we'll be good. Varchar 20. All these fields are required. Okay, there's none of them that are optional. You can't add a contact without these numbers or these pieces of data. Okay? Are you with me? Again, check mark if you're with me, X if you're not. You don't have Localdb under SQL Server. Okay. So again, you're looking at SQL Server Object Explorer, and you should have a Localdb. If you don't, we may have to install something on your system. Google it, please, Gurkhadat. But you may need to install something additional in your Visual Studio installation. So you might be missing something, and I'll check later for this. Okay, now that we have this, notice that there is something that says update on the top left. We want to update. If you click this little update button, then what it'll do is it'll say preparing update script, and then there's 2 options, generate script or update database. If I generate the script, the database doesn't get updated. If we click update database, it'll just send this script we've just made with T-SQL and the designer to the database to create the table. Let's just do this, update database. And then if you notice, it's going to go through a checklist down here. And now we have a new table that's DBO contacts. That's our table. DBO contacts, there's no data in there. Let's add a few pieces of data. And we can do that right here in our SQL Server data access. I'm going to right click here on my SQL Server, and I'm going to look at view data as an option. Okay, view data. It's going to bring us to another window here. Okay, and we have some nulls in here. It's showing us there's no data. Let's put in some data. So first name, we'll say Peter. We'll go Parker. Email address is spiderman@example.com. And our contact number is 416-555-5555. Okay, so that's kind of it. You can also expand these to make it easier for you to see. Okay, that's the first piece of data. Next, let's go to the next piece of data. We're gonna add a few. Okay, so we'll say Tony Stark, some superheroes, right? Iron Man @example.com. 416-555-5556. Okay, we're going to go to the next one. Bruce Banner. Right? The Hulk @example.com. 416-555-5557. Okay. And Stephen Strange and Dr. Strange @example.com. 416-555-5558. Okay, so we've added a few superheroes from the Marvel Universe as an example. Okay, let's add one from DC just to be fair. We'll say Clark Kent, and we'll call him Superman @example.com. Why not? This is just data for us to play with, guys. Okay, so we've got some pieces of data now, and that's it. We've added data. We've added 5 records in our database. That's how simple it is to do it. And I did it by right-clicking, and I went to View Data. That's what I did. Okay. Are you with me? So if you've added some data, you should be with me right now. Press check mark or X if you're not. Gurkrat, are you okay? I see a hand. Is that a hand that you're not okay, or? Otherwise, for the rest of you, it looks like you're doing well. Thank you for following along. You're just installing SQL. Thank you, Gurkrat. All right, so notice like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We can see this data. I want to get this data into my form now. This is the next step. So to do this, now that we have information in our database, in our SQL database, right? I'm going to switch to our our design view. So this is our design view. And up until now, we haven't had a connection to the database. The database is what it is, MS SQL, Localdb. Please make sure this is here so you can see it. All right. We've already got our data grid view here, and you've got your SQL Server Objects Explorer here. Why? So we can see it. Not because you can't do the next steps if you don't do it, but it'll make it easier for us to do this. Okay. I'm going to click on this little smart arrow over here on the right side of the data grid view. Okay. And then it's going to say data source. We don't have a data source. So we're going to click this little drop-down menu, and we're going to say add project data source. It's going to ask us for 2 things. What are we doing? Is it going to be a database, an object, a service? Well, obviously it's a database. Next. We're going to use a data set for this. Okay. In this case, we're going to do a couple of examples. This is the one that we're going to use a data set. Click next. It's going to say, what connection do you have to the database? Do you want to use a standard connection? And the answer is we don't have a connection to the database right now, which means we must make a new connection. So again, let's go back to previous. Previous, we started off, we just selected database, and then we went data set. There's no other choice. And then new connection. In our new connection, notice that it says, what do you want? An access database? No. An ODBC data source? No. a SQL Server database file? That's an actual file, a physical file on your machine? No. Or a Microsoft SQL Server? Yes, this one, third one down. Okay. It says always use this selection. Please uncheck this because otherwise it's always going to do this. It's not going to give you an option for this. And you should have options. I'm going to click continue. All right. It says I'm going to use my data source. I'm going to use a SQL client. You can change this if you want, but we're not going to do that. And then it says, what's the name? Do not click down on this thing. It'll take you forever. Just type in the name for yourself. So you're going to start off with brackets. And it's going to be localdb, close parentheses, backslash, MSSQL. Please make sure, look at the left, localdb. You need to match what this says here with what this says here. If you don't, it will not connect. Okay? Do not press refresh. And there's an option here for Windows authentication. You want to leave it at Windows authentication, please. Do not change this from Windows authentication. Okay? Select or enter a database name. Here we need to select, and this is the test. Can I see my database name less than 11 dB? If you don't see this, you've done something wrong, right? Like example, you've selected the wrong database up here, okay? Or if you see nothing. So make sure you're with me now. I want to wait until you guys are good. If you're with me, check mark. If you're not, X. You know, or if you can't do it, work it out. You're awesome. You've caught up. Hussam, thank you. I see Christina's got it too. The check marks are piling up. This is a good thing. You're missing the installation. Yeah, I thought so. If you don't install everything in your Visual Studio 2019 installation, then what ends up happening is sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, thanks guys. Hopefully, I only have 3 check marks. Are other people still working on it? Can I see some other check marks before I move on? I don't want to move on from this because you're going to be lost. And you won't be able to follow along if I move on from here. So I know I've got some 3 check marks. Are there anyone else? Okay, another 4th one. Sukhjinder did it for me too. Thank you, Sukhjinder. And Remedios. Thank you, Remedios. I'm hoping for everyone else to come in too. And forgive me, I am mentioning your name on YouTube, but they don't know who you are. So don't worry about it. All right, we're going to move on. So hopefully some of you are going to follow along with me or watch the video later. But now that I've got this exactly spelled the way it is, notice this is spelled here and this is spelled here the same. If it's not, you will not be able to connect. I'm using Windows authentication. I could choose to use some kind of SQL Server authentication. We don't have a security, any kind of security that's put into our server. We could add it. We're not going to do that. Okay? We're going to leave it as Windows authentication. If in a real life scenario, you would have to put an authentication, some authentication details in here, username and password as a default. Okay, I'm going to click test connection at this point. And we should see test connection succeeded. Okay? If you don't, there's something wrong. Next, press OK. OK is going to give you this new connection. It's going to create this weird connection string. Godlike desktop, whatever yours is called, /localdb, whatever it's going to be, your connection. And then what we want is to show the connection string that you will save in the application. I want to click this button here. So this is the connection string. Data source is equal to localdb, MSSQL localdb, initial catalog is equal to less than 11 dB. Integrated security is true. This means that you're using Windows security. Okay? And then we're going to click next. And it's asking me to save the connection. What is my connection? A less than 11 dB connection string is okay for now. Okay? Do you want to save the connection string to the application configuration file? Yes, we do. Okay? Then click next. And then we have this little screen that comes up. And this little screen, if you pull it down, you can see that I can select my context table. And I can select certain things to come up. If I don't want my ID to come up, I don't have to select it. But these are the things that I want. Okay? And then click, by the way, down here where it says dataset name, less than 11 dB dataset, leave it as is for now, although we could rename it if we wanted. Press finish. And now, my friends, you have this. And when we run it, by default, right, you'll be able to see this. You should be able to see all your data come up. Now it's big. It's really big. And there's ways that we're going to configure this to make it bigger so we can see this stuff. We want it to be expanded, right, as an example, like this. And so we can see everything, right? Right. So we want to see the data a little bit nicer than how it's projected right now, right? And you can see that I have control over how my form shows my data. Okay, so that's wrong. We should configure it so we don't have control. It's done at design time, not at runtime. All right, cool. So how do I configure this so that it can show the data that I want the way I want it? First of all, are you with me? Do you have first name, last name, email, and contact here? And notice also, I just want to please check mark for that. Notice also while you're doing that, that on the bottom in the gutter, you have three pieces of, or three components. So again, check mark if you have this, please. I want to see if you guys are here, right? Hopefully you guys have something like this now. Yes? Check mark, no, X. I'm waiting because I want to make sure you guys are here. So far I got nothing. I'm going to go do this again. Don't worry. It's not the first or the last time. We're going to do it from scratch again in a second. But notice when I did it, I have three pieces or three components. A lesson DB dataset, a contact binding source, contacts binding source. This is for the table, our binding source, and a contacts table adapter. Those are the three pieces of data, that are three pieces of component, or three components that I've added that are not visible here on my form, but are part of my form. And my form is already using it. For example, if I go to my Solution Explorer and I can look at now what I have done. Two things. I have a new something or another that says lesson 11 db dataset.xsd. Okay, this is a resource. That's what this is, a database, a data set. Okay? That's one. We also have this thing called app.config we've never looked at before. App.config, basically in script, it's an XML script that shows us that we've connected to our database. And you can see the connection string right here. This is connection strings. This is why it's been added. And it shows you the connection string that it showed us earlier inside of the dialog box that we used. Okay? This connection string here is something that you should be seeing in something called app.config. All right. I also have these things still open. I don't need them. Let's close them down. I'm going to go to my designer, my DB view form designer, right? And I want to click on this table again. And I want to click on this smart arrow. So smart arrow now, we've already got our binding source. We don't have to do any kind of data source anymore. But what I want to do is I want to edit columns. Edit columns. And in here, you notice there's another little dialog box that comes up that's quite comprehensive. Please be careful here. What you can do, it tells you a bunch of things. My ID, right? This is the ID field. This is the first name field. This is the last name field. These are all the fields, the columns in my database, right? And if you notice in my ID itself, right, it shows me a couple things. It says that from a design perspective, or my layout is auto size mode not set. Okay? That's what it says. And divide width and fill height, fill weight, and all that stuff is here. It actually can allow you to set auto size mode for each field. Or if I click cancel and I click the data grid view, again, this is what this is called. We need to configure this. And this is data grid view 1. We want to change the name to our context data grid view. Okay. And if you scroll down, it says auto size columns mode. That's the columns so that they fit. I want to make this true, right? I want to make this so that it is, well, actually talk about this. I want to say fill. Notice that immediately changes the way this looks. Okay. auto size rows mode, I want to change this also to where it says rows, all cells. It shows me the row is filled in properly. Okay, now if I run it again, just by clicking those two things, you can see now that I'm starting to see our fields looking better. Okay, so again, all I changed here was I went to the data grid view, clicked onto it, I changed the name, and then I went to auto size columns mode to fill and auto size rows mode to all cells. You can change instead of fill to all cells. And then what it does is it'll actually show you everything in there with you'll have a scroll bar that will be expanded to show that. All right, so let's try this out again. So I'm going to say run. And you can see now that I see all the data. Now I can attempt to make a change. I can go here and press OK. I want to make this, another number like 1, and press enter. And you may think that this is going to change the data, right? But actually, if I just run it again, you can see that it's back to normal. Why? We haven't enabled that functionality. So what Windows Forms allows us to do is quickly create a view. That's what this grid view is. We have to enable the rest of the functionality. Right now, all we can do is we can, out of our CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete. All we can do here is read. We can't do anything else from the database. I can't create new stuff. I can't update the database. And I can't delete stuff from the database. I can only read. By the way, that is the only functionality I'm going to ask you for on your assignment number 5. I'm not going to ask you to do full CRUD, okay, with the database. Why? This is not a database course. And second reason is we don't have a lot of time, right? If I had more time with you, then maybe we would get you to do a bit more, okay? But we can't do more than pretty much this. All right, so that is the first piece. So the first part is this. Now let's take a look at the code. If I press F7, then if you notice that by default, when my database view form loads, I use the context table adapter to fill the table with the data set that comes from the DB dataset context table. That's what it does. It's that simple. It's a one-liner, right? So this one-liner fills the table with this. If without this, you'll see nothing. Example, if I just comment this out, this line. So this is line, in my case, 23 in my DB view form load. And if I was to run this thing, okay, I get nothing because I'm not filling it. Even though I've connected to the database and all that good stuff, it's not doing anything unless I have this one line of code. Okay, that's what this one line does. It says, hey, go to my table adapter, fill it in. Fill my data in there. Okay. If I put it back, and if I run it again, we're good to go. So that is how you connect to a database. In the form itself, here inside of our PDF document or your PowerPoint, it talks about what a database is, what a primary key is, and all this other stuff, okay? Things that you should know from doing your database course already. It also talks about some things here, last name, first name, address, and phone, and it talks about what a database software is and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to skip by all this part and go to our primary key. We've identified our primary key. We need to have a primary key for each of our tables in an SQL database. We should have one. In our case, our primary key is also identity, which means it's auto-incrementing. That's what identity means. I'm just going to skip down here a little bit. All right, so this is something we can do. So it says a shorthand way to a table is to use the table name followed by the parentheses that contain all the field names with the primary key underlined, table students, ID number, last name, first name, and so on. Right? Structured query language is what we can use. We can use select statement, select customer ID, an example last name from table customer where my state is Wisconsin in this case. All right, here's an example of it. Right, we can make our SQL queries like this, right, and they are actually quite verbose, right, But we talked about this idea, and here they talk about how to make an access database. We're not going to make an access database, but it talks about how to do this. What I want to do, right, in my database is I want to be able to loop through the data, and we're going to use LINQ to do it. We've already talked about LINQ earlier in this semester, right? LINQ is Language Integrated Query. And what that does is it allows us to use a different kind of language vocabulary, select from and where, in terms of connecting to our data, right? So here, what it's going to show us as we get into LINQ, this is our as an example of when we did things with an array of numbers, and I want to say from our numbers, from X, right? In numbers, from every number in numbers, where the number is greater than the cutoff, 3, select it. We want to be able to do this kind of stuff again for our database, right? And so we want to connect to our database and our data source. And the way we're going to do that is using LINQ. LINQ is the key for how we're going to do all this kind of stuff, okay? I'm just going to skip through. It talks about here how to do a data grid view, which you've already gone through. It skips you through and explains the binding source and the table adapter that it's used, and you can see that here we have some basic data that comes from the database, okay, just like we have already. And then in the form load event, we're going to have this fill thing. This is where we are. We're on page 35 right now of the PowerPoint slides. Okay, so everything we've done so far to get you to this point. All right, so now here's the next part. It says here they have a show button click. Okay, show button click, and we're using the underneath where it says the table students table adapter fill instead of the load. It says we're going to say for every student where this, in this case, our context, for every contact in this data set, the table, the context table, where, you know, my contact, I want to select all, and I'm not going to put a where statement. I'm going to select all, and I'm going to save this inside of my contacts. Okay, so I want to, when I use this, when I say for, it's like when I do a var contacts, and I use LINQ, what it's going to do when I do this is save my data outside of the table somewhere else. So let's do that next. So here, I'm going to say that I'm going to use LINQ. So again, make sure that LINQ is here, system LINQ. By default it is. And I'm going to do the same thing, right? So I'm going to say var contacts, right? So this is a contacts list, basically, is what I'm getting, right? And that's going to be equal to, just like it says here, we're going to do in the next line, from contact in this dot, the data set. Remember that data set we talked about before? And if you remember what that, if you forget what that data set is called, that's why sometimes what we want to do is rename this data set, less than 11 dB data set, context table adapter. Notice what it says here, context table adapter, dB data set. We have an example of that too, right? If I go back to our form, here we have this less than 11 dB data set context. This is what we want. This dot, a less than 11 dB data set dot contacts, okay? So from every contact in contacts, in our contacts table, we want to select the contact. What we're saying here is select everything and put it inside contacts. Okay? What I want to do now is I want to show all those contacts on our in a debug.writeLine. Right? So I'm going to do something like debug.writeLine. Once I do that, it's going to add in system.diagnostics by default. You should have system diagnostics turn on, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in a for each. So I'm going to type for each, press tab, tab, and it's going to say for my contacts in my contacts, right? For my contact, for every contact in contacts, contacts is going to hold the contact. Notice this is a great place to use var, right? Because look, if I hover over contacts, it's like, whoa, dude, it's huge. It's an enumerable row collection. That's what it says. Of type less than 11 dB dataset.contacts row. That's what it says here, which is pretty crazy, right? It's pretty huge. So we want to do a debug.writeLine, and I want to write line the first name. Remember how we did this before, right? Where the contact.firstName is in here. So if I want to put my first name, and I want to inject the contact first name, how do I do so? What do I do? Is it $sign at the beginning over here, and then curly braces, and then contact dot, and then we want to put first name? Is that how you do it? Right? So what this does is it says, hey, go to the contact. For every contact in contacts, contact is now an object, right? And notice it says lesson 11 db dataset dot contacts row contact, right? And it's going to show our first name. Let's just do our first name. We can do the rest later. And let me run that off and see what happens. So when the table loads now, right, in my output, I have my first name, Peter, Tony, Bruce, Stephen, and Clark. Okay, that's how it should happen. You should see these things come up. So now I've taken the data from the table and I'm using it here. That's what's happening. This is all the data from the table. That's what's happening here. All the data from the table, I'm looping through each piece and I'm putting it in here. Okay? And if I want to show everything, then it's just a matter of me just doing one of these. So first name, last name, email address. Notice how it picks it up. And contact number. Why? Because we've connected to the table, and the table's connected this, or created this object, right? This contact object. This is a think about this as an enumeration, a collection of contacts. That's what this is. Not quite a list of contacts. It's not quite that. All right. So that's what this is. For each contact in contacts, then we do a first name, last name, email, contact number. We can do this. And if I was to print it out now, you can see that we have all the data. We can make this obviously nicer by at the beginning and at the end. We can put in some kind of debug.writeLine. Just from a separation perspective, let's put some equal signs. So we know that this is our contact separated, each of the contacts. And at the end, we'll put in a separate debug.writeLine as a space, just so that way we can configure our output a little bit. So again, WriteLine takes 0 arguments. We have to put in at least a space in here, debug.writeLine. And you can see now what's happening. So here's our first contact, second contact, third contact, and it's printing out. So everything we've got in here, it prints out here in our debug view. This is good. This means we have access to the data, and that's what we do here. Right? We're actually looping through. That's what the link allows us to do. For every contact in contacts in the contact table, we can filter it if we want. We can filter by ascending if we want to, right? So we can do that. But we can actually show it. We can put this information inside of a list if you want to as well. Here they're just showing students with a high GPA. Well, that's what they've done here in this example, all right? And that's what this does. Select, we can specify the last name only, or we can specify the entire object, right? Whenever we specify a specific thing like the last name, then when we output stuff, right, as an example, then only the part that we store is going to be stored inside of our object. Here, in our example, we're storing everything, the entire contact. But we don't have to. We can say, well, I only want contact.firstname, right? And now this is going to be a list of first names, right? strings, a list of strings. That's what it's going to be, as opposed to a list of contacts. And now, if you notice here, it's no longer valid. Each contact is a first name, so that way only the first names will be out, right? So we could definitely specify, one of the fields instead of every field, okay, if we really wanted to. And that's what this is showing us here. One thing we want to do is, again, you can see here they're just filtering. They're filtering whatever the minimum GPA is to filter, and that's what's showing here. So this is nothing different. It's showing us we can specify the minimum GPA that we want. It also talks about aggregation operators with min and max and sum. We can totally do that, count and so on. We're not going to do that here. I'm going to skip by to the good works that are further down. So this is something we can do. Order by whatever it's going to be, right? Let's do that. Let's order by. So this time we'll say order by last name. Okay, so contact.last name is what we want to do, right? Order by contact last. Notice there's no commas in here. There's none. Each of these clauses is separate. Okay, so if I run this now, and the way it's going to do it now is it's going to do it by last name. So Bruce Banner, Clark Kent, Peter Parker, Tony Stark, Stephen Strange. Not in the same order that we're seeing it here. It's going to order it by last name. All right, so that is that example. We've talked about this, how to order it by. Okay, and here they're just doing more more details. We can group by the grade point average if we really want to. We're not going to do that. And that's really it in a nutshell. That's what it does. Okay, so that's link. Now remember, we can do other things with link. All right, so what if I want to order by contact name and I want to use descending as opposed to ascending? Well, I can just put the descending word in there. And if I did this descending instead of ascending by default, it's ascending, right? And if I run this thing now you'll see it the other way around. You'll see it'll start off as Stephen Strange, Tony Stark, Peter Parker. Why am I showing you this, Bill? Because what's happening is we're actually getting data out of the table. That's what's happening. Okay, we're getting data out of the table. And this is the first thing we're going to do to connect. Now, I want to take this data and I want to save it somehow, right? So I've got the data. But remember, this contacts is not a this whole thing at all. It's not what we're used to doing, okay? And what I mean by that is contacts, we want to take contacts, the contacts DB, right? Or the contacts table. We want to convert it to a list, all right? So how will we do this thing? Well, I can kind of do one of these. I can wrap my contacts in these parens, okay? That's totally fine. And if I start typing 2, notice I can do a couple things. I can make it an array, I can make it a dictionary, or I can make it a list. If I make it 2 lists, just like this, right? Now what's happened is something different. If I hover over contacts, now it's a list of less than 11 dB dataset contacts row contacts, called contacts. Right, that's what it is. But it's a list, nevertheless, which means I can do list things with this thing. It's not going to change anything in here. For example, if I go run this thing now, it's going to do the same thing we did before in descending order. But now that it's a list, my friends, I have a lot of control of what I can do to it, right? It's no longer an enumeration, a weird enumeration, but actually a list. I've converted it to a list. Let's not make it descending now. Okay, and what I want to do is for each, I want to make that context class we made before. So I'm going to right click on my solution, and I'm going to add a new item, right, which is going to be a class. Here's my class. We're going to call this the contact class. Just like before in our contact class, we're going to add in those fields, right? So in my contact class, I'm going to have my, again, we'll make this class public. and we're going to make a bunch of public fields. Public, actually we'll just use prop for this, prop, and it's going to be a string. My first name is going to be the first field, just like we've done before. And I'm just going to copy this a bunch of times, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, and this will be last name. Just make this quick because we're going to run out of time with what I want to do. And here's email address, and this is contact number. Okay, so those are the fields in our contact class. And we could also have a contact constructor. So we can call this public contact. And our public contact constructor could take a first name, which is a string. So we'll say first name, right? We'll say that that's equal to something by default, nothing. We could accept a null. We are also going to take a last name and email address. Just going to make some room here and here, which is going to be a string type. Again, all the things we've done last time, nothing new. And as well as contact number, if I can spell contact properly. Okay, so that is our constructor. And then my contact constructor, of course, what I'm going to say is that first name is equal to first name, last name is equal to last name, and email address is equal to email address, and as well as contact number is equal to contact number. Okay, so I've done all this stuff just in case. We have two ways of entering it. I could enter it directly, because these are all public, or I could enter it through my contact constructor. So these are public properties. And this is our constructor. We only have one. Okay, so very simple class. We've done this before. Okay, we've done this before. And now in here, instead of just doing this, instead of adding in my contacts, then what I want instead is I want my contacts to be added in. I'm going to loop through and I'm going to attach them. So I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say that, the right thing to do would be not to make my class here an instance of my class, but actually to make it in my Solution Explorer under the program CS file, program.cs. So if I click on the program.cs file here, I want to make a static member, and it's got to be public. Let's make our class public static. We're also going to make this public and static, and our public static object, which is going to be the contacts. All right, it's going to be of type. So we're going to make this public list of type contact, which we're going to call contacts, lowercase. Okay. We're going to define it here, and we're going to instantiate it in here before we run it. After we set compatible text rendering defaults, we're going to set it up in here. We're going to say that our contacts is going to be equal to new list of contact. That's what this is going to be. And this is going to instantiate an object, a list of contacts. All right, that's empty. So this is going to be a new empty list of contacts. This is different than what we did last time. Last time we made one contact. Now we're going to make a list of contacts to store everything. Okay, a list of contacts. But we're going to access it from program.contacts. That's how we're going to do it. Okay, so just like we've done before, we're going to say that for every contact in contacts, we're going to say program.contacts.add we're going to make a new contact, right? But the new contact we're going to make is going to be temporary. So we're going to say a new temporary contact, new contact, which is going to be equal to the contact that I want. All right. Now this is pretty cool, right? So contact is going to be a list item, right? The list item is going to be of, if I hover over, it says new contact, right? Or what I really want to do is configure it, new contact. And I can configure it in here by doing something like this. So instead of new contact here, I could put in new contact here. This is going to pass in a contact to the contacts object, program.contacts.add. And why is this giving me an issue? Oh yeah, this is a problem. And then we're going to say something like this. In our constructor, our contact first name is going to be here. Our contact last name, and then our contact email address, followed by our contact contact number. So this takes care of all the requirements for each of the contacts. I'm making a brand new temporary contact. Notice if I hover over the var, it says it's a contact, right? I'm getting this new contact, and I'm adding it to the contacts list. That's what this is doing. So on load, it creates that list of contacts for me. Okay. Now this is not a great way of doing it, but I mean we're going to just go with this example for today. So if I run it, right, it should not give me an error at this point. It doesn't give me any output either. Cool. I want to be able to save my contacts, right, to a file. I want to be able to save my contacts to a file, but I want to do it with a menu. So here's a new object we're going to add in. I'm going to go to my toolbox. And there are, if I scroll down to where it says menus and toolbars, I'm going to drag in a menu strip into my form. Okay, menu strip. There's a menu strip. And here we can put in a new object. I can type in what this thing is going to be called. We're going to call this save contacts, our contact list. Let's say we'll save contact list. And we'll also make another, actually we'll make it down here, another object down here, which is going to be exit. Make an exit button. Oh, save contacts list is the name. So let's call this the file menu, because that's how we're setting up file normally, so we do it. And inside here we're going to say this is the, it's not what I wanted, but it's okay. Let's leave that there for a second. I meant to put in another option, which we can move around in a second, called save is going to be the thing that I want. And if you notice, I can move it around just by dragging and dropping it. I can also add in a separator, which I can also drag and drop between the save and the exit. So between the save and the exit, let me move the save up. There we go. So now if I go file, you can see save and exit with a little separator in the middle, and I got the separator by just using this little menu. So that's all. I can just save. Okay. I'm going to double click on the save button. This is going to bring up the save tool strip menu item. For exit, we want to use application.exit. Okay, just like normal, like we did last time. So when I click the exit button, it's going to exit the application. When I click save, I want that save file dialog to come up to save, right? So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go into my form, and I'm going to go into dialogs. And I'm going to drag in my save file dialog onto my form anywhere, which is going to give me this save file dialog. I've also got an extra menu strip component here too when I dragged in the menu strip. Okay, so I got a menu strip and a save file dialog, some new stuff. My menu script, if I go into my properties, I'd like to rename this to, like, you know, this is my primary menu. That's what this is, so I know what it is. I know what it's called, the primary menu strip. I might have a secondary or something else. in my save file dialog, by the way, you can move this around down here. In my save file dialog, this is going to be the contacts save file dialog, contact list save file dialog, contact list save file dialog. I know it's long. I want to configure it. My default file name is going to be contact list, and my default extension is going to be text txt. I'm also going to put in the filter. If you notice under filters, it gives us that what it shows for filters. My filter is going to be text files with a pipe star.txt, another pipe that's going to show all files. I like that, all files. Another pipe star.star. That's going to be our filter for our save file dialog that's going to come up. Okay. Initial directory we're going to program. So I want to go to my save file dialog, this one, this save toolstrip menu item. Remember what we need to do for this. In my save toolstrip menu item object, I've got to instantiate a new object of, well, actually I've got to configure it. So first is configure the save file dialog. Remember, this is the first step. And what I'm going to do with my configuration is talk about the initial directory. So contact list save file dialog dot initial directory is equal to directory dot get current directory, like we've done before. This is not new. Okay, this is not new. So we've configured the directory, and now what we need to do is configure the result, right? So we're going to say if, actually, let's make the result first. We'll say that the result is equal to whatever it's going to be, right? So we're going to say that var save file dialog result is equal to contact list save file dialog dot show dialog, right? Show dialog is going to display the dialog, display the save file dialog, and save the results in the save file dialog result object, this thing. Notice if I hover over var, it says it's a system windows.forms dialog result. If the dialog result, if save file dialog result, this one, is not equal to cancel, so it's something else. It's like it's going to be something that we want to do. Then we want to make that new stream writer, right? So we're going to say that the new stream writer, right? We're going to make a new stream writer. So we're going to say stream writer is equal to a new stream writer that's going to have the file name as the result. We're going to say that the save file dialog it's going to contact list save file dialog dot file name is going to be the name that we're going to use for the file. This is going to make the stream. So create new stream. Okay. And again, this is all inside this one load function. It's going to do everything here. Well, actually, everything's in the save toolstrip menu item when I click this. It's going to make the stream. And after I make the stream, what I want to do is, remember, we want to clean up, which we're going to do the stream writer dot flush, stream writer lowercase dot flush, and we're also going to do a stream writer lowercase dot close, right? Which is going to clean up my stream writer. Here we're actually going to write stuff out, right to the file, and we're going to do a for loop just like we've done in the past, right? We're going to do this for loop, right? For every contact in contacts. So we're going to do for each, and we're going to say var contact, for every contact in, the contacts collection, program.contacts. Contacts is going to have a bunch of contacts. We're going to write it out. We're going to say streamwriter.writeLine, and we're going to write out each one in order. So contact.firstname, and we're going to just copy paste the rest. We're doing pretty good. Again, this is just review of what we did last day, right? We didn't do anything much more than this, to be honest. First name, last name, email address, and contact number. Okay, so that does everything there. And this will write everything. If everything goes well, it'll write everything out. Let's test this to make sure it works. So I'm going to run it. And if I click File, notice that the menu comes up now. I can click Exit. It'll exit my menu. And if I run it again, and if I click File, Save, it'll bring up my little dialog box. We want to go into my big bin debug folder, and we want to save the contact list.txt, and I want to click Save. And if I did that, then in the bin debug folder, so if I want to see that, I can right click on my solution, go to Open Folder in File Explorer, and we can see that one day. It's just in another window for me. Sorry, guys. There it is. I want to go to my bin debug folder, and let's take a look at that contact list here. So double click. And what it's going to show you is this exactly, just in that order. Bruce Banner, the Hulk, and then the number, and then it's going to do it in ascending order, right? This kind of stuff. Cool. This is great. Let's put this up on GitHub finally. So I'm going to go to GitHub, and I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. You're going to see we're going to have a pile of changes here. I've made my contacts. I added a connection. I changed my app.config. I'm going to say added basic view and save functionality. All right. Commit all. Home. Sync. And push. I'm going to push this up on GitHub. For the GitHub link, remember that the GitHub link is always going to appear inside of your, right here, right? So here's the GitHub link. This is for you guys. I'm going to copy this, and inside of our files this week, I'm going to make a new link for this GitHub link for week 11. Open as external resource. And you should be able to see that link now, which is important because this way you can follow along with the video and then compare your work with mine. That's important. Okay? Cool. So that is the GitHub link. Now there's one more thing we want to do before we stop for the day, which is now that we've got our file save, what about if I want to make a file open? And I can't do that here in this form. I want to make another form, right, that opens up the data and displays it. Let's do that quickly. I know you're going to say it's impossible. There's no way I can make that, Tom. Yes, we can. We might be a little bit late, but we're going to try. All right, so we're going to make a new form, file, add, right, and we're going to go new form. We're going to call this the contact info form, right? Contact info form. Contact info form. The contact info form we have to configure. So let's do that, all that configuration stuff really quickly, guys. I'm not going to do everything from scratch like before. I'm just going to do it assuming that you know what to do at this point. You should know what to do because we've done this more than once. We've done this more than one time, right? Which is important to know. We should know how to do all this stuff, right? So again, just going to go quickly and modify stuff like before. So form border style is going to be fixed single. I'm going to change the size. No, my font size. I'm going to change this to 20. I want to make the form so that it fits a size of 800 by 600. Center string is what is happening. I want to disable the maximize box to false. and I have everything that I need to get going now. What I do need is some kind of next button. So from the other form, so the other form itself, DB view form, right? I want a next button, so I'm going to go to my toolbox, and I'm going to add a next button. So a new button, drag and drop. Let's make this button 150 by 50. Right? And let's make this button, we're going to call this the next button. Okay, that's going to say next on it too. I'm going to put this in the corner. Right? I'm going to double click to make a connection to the next button click event. Now remember, we can't do a new form from scratch. We want to start off with the in programs and make a new form. We haven't made the contact info form yet, but we're going to do that here. So just like we did last time, we're going to instantiate two forms, public, static, and the first form is going to be the DB view form, right? And public, we should probably name it DB view form, and public static. We're going to make this contact info form. Okay, so we got those two things, but we have to instantiate them here. Let's do that here. So I'm going to say that the DB view form is going to be equal to, come on, arg. That's okay. The more I slow down, the faster you'll be to DB view form is equal to a new DB view form, and the contact info form is going to be equal to a new contact info form. And we're going to, instead of making a new DB view form here, we're going to make it so that we can have a DB view form that's going to be passed into there. So that will make it, if I press start just to test, we should be able to see our DB view form as normal. That's all I've done. But now we have our contact info form that we can get to from my DB view form. And what I want to do is in my DB view form.cs, when I click the next button, I want to go to my contact info form. So contact info form.show. And I meant to do that as in program.contactinfoform. Program.contactinfoform.show. That's going to show my form, and I'm going to hide this. All right, this is going to hide this form and show the next form. And the next form is going to have another menu strip, right? I know I'm going fast, guys, but I want to finish on time. And we lost a little bit of time in the beginning. I do apologize. So in my contact info form here, we're going to drag and drop another menu in there. All right, so again, I'm going to go to menus and toolbars. I'm going to grab my menu strip, drag it in there to the top left corner. And I'm going to put this is going to be called the file menu, right? And in the file menu, I want a new option that's going to be called open. And then we're going to have a separator, followed by an exit button. Okay, so file, open, separator, exit. That's what I want in here. All right, I want to double click on open to make the open tool strip menu item click event, right? As well as the exit. We know exit is going to be application exit. Okay, want to do that. Also, one thing we have to notice now that we've made the program go to my application, when I want to exit this contact info form by clicking on the X button here, it's not going to close. We need to have that event fire, right? So I'm going to go to my contact info form.designer, and in the form itself, I'm going to click on the little lightning bolt and go with the form closing event like we've done last week. Form closing, double click. It's going to make this contact info form closing event, and in the contact info form closing event, we're going to do the same application exit. So that way the form can close. By the way, we can also make it so that it shares the exit tool strip menu item click, which we'll do next week. So we don't have to do this duplication stuff. So this closes, no problem. That's the first form, and if I go to the next form, then so too does this. I'm just testing every option, as well as this. Okay, but now I need a series of objects. Let's put a list box, in my new form. So contact info form. Let's just have a list box that shows up. So my list box by default is going to be empty, right? Here's my list box, right? And my list box is a new control. We haven't talked about this before, right? And notice that if I go to my thing, it says use data bound items. There's no data bound items that I have in here. But one thing from my list box is, if you notice that my list box, which is going to be my contact list box, that's what that is. When I load, I want my contact list box to show, remember that there is a items object, which is a collection of items that comes up here, right? I just want to show last names in here, right? So my items.add, I want to show the last names in here in my contact list box when I load it. By default, if I go there and if I run, it's unbound. So I go here and there's nothing. I don't see anything in my list box. But if I go File, Open, my hope is that it's going to load all the details in here. Let's put that in there into place. So File, double click on Open. We're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to do the file dialog. But we don't have a file dialog yet. Let's make that. So we're going to go to Dialogs and drag in the Open File dialog in the form, which we're going to use. We're going to rename this. This is going to be called the contact list open file dialog. And this is going to be the primary menu strip for this form. Okay, so we got that, this, and my contact list box. We'll make it one single line like this for now. We won't be able to finish this off, but we'll see what we can do. I know I'm running late, guys. Give me another few minutes, and then I'll put this up on GitHub, and I'll show you how this works. Again, File, Open. I'm going to do the same thing like we did before. I want to configure it. Oops. Yeah. We can configure the dialog first here. So like before, I want to get that filter. So I'm going to say something like text files, right? Pipe star.txt, pipe all files, pipe star.star, enter. Okay, so that's going to take care of that. My file name is going to be contact list. My default extension is going to be txt. And then what I want to do is I want to configure inside the contact form.cs. I want to configure this. So configure the open file dialog by going to the open file dialog itself. So contact list open file dialog dot initial directory is equal to directory dot get current directory, like we've done before. So that does that. Just going to give some more room here. And then what we want to do is, after we've done this, we've got our file dialog, it's committed. I want to open it up, right? So we need a var open file dialog. It's not going to be the same, sorry guys. Dialog result is equal to the contact list open file dialog.show dialog. All right, we got this. So this is open the file dialog, right? And then once we open it up, if my open file dialog result is not equal to dialog result.cancel, so it's not a cancel result, but we know we want to create our a new stream reader. So we're going to say stream reader is equal to a new stream reader. We're going to pass in the contact list open file dialog dot file name. This is all stuff we've done again last day. I know I'm going fast, but I do apologize. Okay, so that's what this does. And then we need to clean it up. But all we can do is do a stream reader dot close. Okay, we can't do the flush because flushing only works for closing, for saving, not opening. But here we're going to read in the list, and we're going to do a for each. Okay, for each. And for each contact in our contacts, right? Now, here's something that we got to think about, right? Before, what we did was we read, right? And we don't know how big the contact collection is. We know because our contact collection is the way it is. But how do I read more than one, right? So this is something we're going to have to handle, because I want to read more than one object from my file, right? So this is like, I want to use my stream reader and I want to read in, let's read in one. So the way it would read in one is we want to say something like this. We're going to say that the contact, so our contact list box, I want to do this. Contact list box dot items dot add, and I want to add in a thing from the stream reader. Stream reader dot notice it says read to end, reads all characters from the current position to the end of the stream. I also want to read line, but I want to read line the first line, right? I want to read line the first line, and the first line is going to be the first name, right? First name, last name. But if I was to do this, I want to kind of read in a bunch of them. So I want to kind of do stream reader dot read line a bunch of times, right? So, but I want to discard the results. So this one, I'm going to do it again and again. I'm just going to put some semicolons in there. So I want to read in the first one, first name, because that's how it's stored. And then I want to read the last name, because I want to do my last name. And I want to store the last name in my item. It's only going to do it once. Now, why did I do this? Because I want to skip by the other ones for now. I'm not storing them. Okay. Eventually, I want to store them somewhere else. Like next week, we'll continue this thing, and we'll store them. But if I was to do this and run it, then what's going to happen is when I go save. So actually, I've already saved it. If I go File, Open, it's going to bring up my Open File dialog. I'll be able to go to my contact list and click Open. And when I do so, we're going to see banner. Okay. I want a list, not just banner. So how do I do this? Well, we need to do a while loop. So while my, okay, so we're going to do a while. And while my stream reader dot, while I read, right? And it's like I want to keep going until I'm done, right? So now there's some options here. So read to end, to string, right? Read line, while, and it says end of stream. So what is this thing? It says gets a value that indicates whether the current stream position is at the end of the stream. Okay, and it is a getter. All right. So while it's not this, right? It's not stream reader end of stream. Then I want to keep doing this. Let's see if this works or if it fails. So if I run this thing now, and I click next, and I click file, and I click open, and I select my contact list and press open, then I should get a list of all my names. Okay? And this is where I want to stop. But I want to configure that list a little bit before we go. So last thing, I swear. So here in my list right now, the configuration, the view that I'm getting is weird, right? So it says allow drop false, anchor, back color, column width, data source. We don't have any. We're going to supply the data source. That's what we're doing. Enabled is true. Generate member, horizontal extent, horizontal scroll bar, right? Item height is 31. Number of items. Here's the location, the margin, the maximum size, and so on. Minimum size. Multi-columns, I can put false. I can have more than one column. Selection mode is 1, right? I can select more than one. Sorted, tab index, tab stops, and so on. Now what I could do is if I was to extend this, right? So let's say, for example, I know that my name is going to be like this. I also have control here. I can edit my items if I had an item to edit, but here I don't. I can make my list items so I can display more than one item. And if I was to do this and press play, next, file, open, click the contact list and open, you're going to see that I can see all the items and I can select one. What we're missing, and this is for you to do if you can try this out. When you select one item, like banner, have a list of first name, last name, and stuff displayed to the right, which is what we're missing. And this was going to give us everything we need to start going. Now, so this lesson, what did we learn? Let me put this up on GitHub. We learned about connecting to a data source and opening up a database. Lots and lots of stuff here, like normal. I'll say added contact info form. Home, sync, and push. So you have everything that I have now. You can always try my application. One thing you're going to miss if you try this out and it won't work for you is the SQL Server Object Explorer. If your Object Explorer is, if you're not using Localdb, MS SQL Localdb, or if you try and hand me something that doesn't have this, right, then it will fail. Okay? It will fail. All right, so that is things. So in this lesson today, what we talked about, and I know I'm running late, I do apologize, guys. Thank you so much for sticking on. Is the first thing we did was we connected to our database. We talked about this, how to make a database, how to make a table. We talked about that first. And then after we did that, we said, okay, well, how do I see the data? We did that through our data grid view. This is a standard control that we use in Windows forms and even in web forms. When we want to see a data grid view. Now we did it the most simplest way possible. So we just used it. We haven't done anything with it. We haven't set it up so you can write out to the database or anything like that. We're just reading. And then what we talked about menus and how to save the stuff that comes from the database in using a menu system by using the save toolstrip menu item. You can make as many menu items as you want, and I did it in a very customized way. Next day when we get together on Monday, I'm going to show you how you can put all the items in place all at the same time. There's a really quick way to do that. As well as, what if I wanted to put in some icons, like for the buttons, like here, right? I want to have an icon strip as opposed to just menu items. Well, there's a way of doing that, and we'll talk about that. So I used the tool strip menu item, and we did the exact same thing we did last day with the save button, but we did it with a menu item instead. Next day, what we're going to do is we're going to add in additional buttons to help us with doing the same thing. And we're going to use a shared event handler to do the saving and the exiting and all that kind of stuff. All right. So that's what we did with our saving. We also talked about how to use link to kind of connect to the list. That's what we did with link. And we used our contact info form to load our last names into a list box, which we've never used before. We used our contact info form to open a toolstrip menu item. We opened up the object, and what we did was we used a little while loop to loop through each of the records on file and ignoring the first field, which is the first name, going to the last name, and ignoring the last two fields. We have to do this because we have to skip to the next record in this way until we reach the end of line. Once we reach the end of stream, we stop reading, we close out our connection, and that's what we've done. Okay? Questions before I stop recording? Guys, thank you so much for sticking around. I'm going to stop streaming now, and I'll take questions.